folks. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. We are currently live, yes, just making sure we're on here. Hope everyone is doing well on this Monday night. As always, I always like to say this is kind of my favorite way to start the Monday. I mean, nobody really likes Mondays, so why not start it with some fun Bigfoot-related, cryptid, or otherwise related conversations. So having a good time. Thanks to everyone who tuned in last week. Last week we had a great show with Jay Birch. That was really cool. It's always great talking to somebody who's, had a eyewitness encounter, has actually seen one of these things. So that was really interesting talking to Jay and talking about that area of Washington State where he had his kind of pretty harrowing encounter. I mean, I know a lot of people messaged me afterwards and were saying, it sounded like a pretty kind of scary incident. And yeah, it was just great to talk with Jay. He's a good dude. Has a great channel as well. So that was a lot of fun. This is, I believe, stream 85 here. So we're getting up there in the numbers. For folks just tuning in, maybe first time listening, this is a live stream we do every week at 8 p.m. Eastern. As I mentioned, we talk about Bigfoot and cryptids and other topics as well, and have a variety of guests on. So we like to have a good time with it. But if you like this kind of thing, feel free to subscribe. Hit that like button. I know everyone on YouTube says it's kind of annoying, but if everyone does it, it kind of helps just with the channel and getting the message out there, and just having been able to do it. So it's a lot of fun, and I appreciate you guys and everyone who tunes in. Obviously, we'll do some shout outs here in a little bit, but just a couple of announcements. So upcoming this week, actually, I believe Thursday for the moment, new Beyond the Trail of episodes coming out over on the Small Town Monsters channel. That should be pretty interesting. It's called The Monster of Minerva. Currently finishing up editing that. So that'll be ready for channel members over on the Small Town Monsters channel. It's out next week for the public as well. And that's sort of a tie-in to Seth's Bigfoot project, which has been an ongoing series as well on that channel about that particular property in Minerva. It's a little different than some of the Beyond the Trail of episodes we've done so far, in so much that those are usually, us going out into some deep wilderness areas or places where there really aren't a lot of people around and looking for these things and talking to folks who have researched these areas. But this is, kind of Eastern Ohio, a lot of farms, a lot of communities. It's definitely a little bit interesting. For me, it was certainly an interesting experience. It's not the typical kind of place I would imagine something like a Sasquatch to be, but the reports from that area have been pouring in for decades. So that's something to think about, really interesting. So that'll be fascinating. Like I said, that's this Thursday over in the Small Town Monsters channel. What I'll do is actually play a clip for it. How about that, guys? Well, you guys will get a exclusive little peek here. Let me just play this. Let me see, where's this video file? Okay, so this is the intro sequence to that, and I will play that and get out of the way. So here we go. So there you have it. I wasn't really expecting to play that tonight, but might as well just show it. You guys the first ones to see it. I haven't even posted that on social media or anything yet, so that's fun. That is, as I mentioned, will be coming out. But enough about that. Let's get on with the show here. Just an announcement. I'm not sure about next week's show. We might be doing a show with Stacy Brown. I'm not sure yet, to be confirmed, but I will post about that later during the week. So without further ado, let's talk about our guest real quick. Let's read the bio. So tonight I'm joined by Robert Robinson. So Robert enlisted in the U.S. Army as an airborne military policeman and served for 21 years. He retired in 2003 and started teaching JROTC at Summerlin Academy in Bartow, Florida. He's got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, as well in this is a tongue twister for some reason, as well as an associate's degree in general studies. I apologize, I'm tripping over myself here. He did general studies, and he's a certified PADI wreck diver, a PADI, I don't know. I'm assuming that's how it's said. He's actually filmed a lot of sequences involving, the skunk ape, that sort of stuff. So he's been on PBS's Weird Florida on the Road Again, as well as Monsters and Mysteries in America, Bigfoot in America, as well as Destination America channel. In 2010, he also appeared on the TV show Wife Swap as the monster hunting family. That's really interesting. I'm going to have to ask him about that. But along with Bigfoot and other cryptids, Robert also investigates haunted places, UFOs, buried treasure, and mysterious places. He is an active member of the following groups: MFON, the International Cryptozoology Society, the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoology Club, the Ghost Club, the International UFO Museum, and World Explorers Club. He is also a Florida representative of the North American Dogman Project. Robert is an investigator and member of UFO Hunters of America, and he's published a book called Legend Tripping: The Ultimate Adventure in 2016, and has also contributed to the Florida Skunk Ape kind of mythos in the Wood Knox Volume 3. And he's got a new book called International Legend Tripping: Adventure Outside the Box, which will be coming out in the fall. So without further ado, let's just bring Robert right in. Hey, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. I apologize, I was tripping over the bio there. It's always tough reading through some of that stuff, but appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, to just kind of get it all out of the way, what got you interested in this topic? Or, I mean, I don't know if it's all together or Skunk Ape specifically. What got you down the path of sort of legend tripping?
The Legend of Boggy Creek. Like a lot of other investigators, saw it in 1974. Dad took us to the drive-in double feature. It was one of the movies. Don't even remember what the second movie was. Took my brother to the popcorn stand, saw the poster, and then we sat down and I watched it in the back seat with just my head poking over the top of the seat, watching it. And it scared me. It scared that, especially when it's, the movie starts off saying this is a true story. And then, and then on the way home, I kept thinking, man, that thing may be in my backyard, even though I lived in an apartment complex. And got home, set my brother out back with me because I figured I could run faster than my brother. So if it was out there, he'd get my brother instead of me. And I went to school. I was talking to some of the teachers. They started telling me about Bigfoot and stuff and other Loch Ness Monster, and introduced me to Ivan T. Sanderson books, John Keel books and stuff. And I went from being scared to, being fascinated, and to, it just got to be something I was really passionate on, as a kid reading about. If I had to do a book report, I would go do it on a book about the unexplained, or, about Bigfoot and stuff.
Right on. Sounds like that sounds familiar to me. I'll put it that way. It's always interesting talking to folks. You run into so many in these circles, I suppose, that they've gotten into it because they had an early childhood interest, like yourself and myself. But then there's the ones that have gotten into it because they had an encounter. So that's why I like to ask that question. I know it's pretty basic, but I think it just sort of sets the groundwork for kind of why somebody gets into the field, why somebody's pursuing mysteries. And I'm honestly, I can't believe that more people aren't curious, because I think, I don't know if you'd agree, I'm assuming so, that we are driven by this sort of curiosity, this mystery, longing for the mystery that's out there. I don't know how people can just live their lives and not think like, well, does this thing maybe exist, or what are these UFOs? I don't know. I think it's a better way to live personally, but that's just me.
Well, they're always discovering new animals, around. I mean, I had a scientist one time tell me there's nothing in science saying that these animals can't exist.
Right.
And he goes, but, I don't have enough to where I can go into my college and get, a grant to go look for it. He goes, but that's where I got you guys. He goes, you're out there. And when you do find this, we'll take over from there after you, finally find this animal.
And that's awesome. That's a great way of encouraging people, saying, the science doesn't necessarily say that it doesn't exist. Because I think a lot of people, especially in kind of the Bigfoot world, tend to really have a sort of disdain for scientists and science in general, thinking, oh, they're against us and all that sort of stuff. But it's really, so, I mean, I remember as a kid having teachers tell me, oh, that stuff can exist. And That's sort of discouraging, right? It's like you almost want to go against what they're saying just to kind of spite them, right? But that's great when somebody just sort of lays the groundwork and says, hey, we don't have enough evidence to say these things are real, but we can't really disprove it. So why don't you go out there and just sort of look for it yourself? And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't see any harm in that.
Well, I mean, I also had a fish and wildlife guy. His son was one of my students, and it's ironic. We were doing an outside project over in Lake Wells, and he came up to me. I was sitting down, and he came up. He said, "My son tells me you go out looking for the skunk ape here and stuff." I said, "Yeah, that's one of the things I enjoy doing." He goes, "Yeah, we're not allowed to talk about it." I said, "Yeah, that's why I had that from a lot of park rangers." He goes, "Yeah, we're pretty much told, when we're approached by it, we can pretty much just say, are you sure it wasn't a bear or anything?"
Right.
I said, so that's kind of the standard. He said, yeah, because he said if we were to acknowledge that these animals were out there, there would be more people out there in the woods with guns, and nobody would go camping anymore. He said, because there's a big hairy monster out there. And he says the good thing is these sightings are so sporadic that a lot of times we can just say, hey, dispel them. Are you sure it wasn't a bear? Because we've had bear sightings out there. How can you be sure? So, but I remember him telling me that they have a little protocol.
Right.
They do, when somebody does come to them with a sighting.
And that is really interesting. And I want to dive into conversations about Florida with you. As you know, we've been talking behind the scenes. We have some upcoming stuff for Florida. I've been, I think, every single day glued to Google Earth, when I'm supposed to be doing other things, just looking at maps and checking stuff out and finding out, doing as much research. I've gone down to Florida Panther binge kind of thing as well. Another story into itself. But I do want to just shout out a few people in the chat. We have some awesome people listening as always. Tate, friend of the show, he says, I'm here to party and only party. That's Tate Hieronymus for you folks. Take it or leave it. We've got Jay Birch of Bigfoot and Barbecue and Camp Cookbook. So he was our guest last week. As I mentioned, he was an eyewitness out in Washington. Go check out Jay's channel. I want to learn how to barbecue and cook with him because he does some great stuff on there, and he has a show where he interviews folks as well. We've got New Hampshire Sasquatch. What is going on, man? Nice to see you. Mark Dodman says, standing in Gippsland region of Victoria, Australia, new to your channel, Alex. Well, welcome, Mark. Awesome to have you down there in the land of the Yowie. That's pretty cool. We've got Upper Canada Sasquatch. How's it going? Glenn H., Cape Cod in the house. Hope the weather's good down there in the Cape. Got Peggy Curtis. How you doing, Peggy? Happy holidays to you as well. Jonathan Dodd. What is going on, my friend? Our Canadian friend, Kevin Hamilton as well. We've got Piton. We've got Yogi and Boo Boo. Greetings, picnic basket lovers. That's a new one. I haven't seen that username. Welcome. And then we got Mothman 46 as well, and Estelle Harrington. Lots of other cool folks. Brent, of course, of the Tall Ones. Had Brent on a couple weeks ago in the show. Great dude. Love the way he kind of operates in this field. So go check out Brent as well at the Tall Ones. We've got Leon. What is going on, Leon? Of Bigfoot Okanagan, another one of those great researchers you should definitely check out and stay tuned and kind of listen to some of these folks. I think a lot of people have a lot to offer in this field, and the more kind of sources you have for different techniques and ideas, I think ultimately it benefits those of us in this sort of research world and just the community in general, if we can call it a community. I mean, we create our own communities, even if there is really no Bigfoot community, I guess. But so of all the sort of legends, legend tripping, it's obviously there's a lot of different components to kind of what you've been looking into. But of all the things you've looked into, is there one that particularly has captivated you? Is it the skunk ape, or is it something else? What is kind of that one that's always sort of, if you have one, or do you kind of love them all?
I like them all, but I do, and you kind of pick up on that with my books, is I do like going out, looking for Bigfoot or the skunk ape, as it's called here in Florida, a lot, because I just like going out camping and stuff. And these animals are seen all over the United States. In fact, I think Hawaii is the only state that doesn't have any Bigfoot, but they got a legend of some little gnome creatures or elves out there.
Many Hoonies, yeah.
But that's the thing about it. They're all over the place. So wherever you go, and nowadays, I think there's almost a Bigfoot research team in every state. So you go up there, or get on the internet and say, hey, I'm coming up to Pennsylvania, I'm coming up to Ohio,
Right.
I'm coming up to New Hampshire, and I'd like to hook up with you guys, which I have, I have not ran into a Bigfoot research team that has not invited me to come out and participate with them. They're very, very, yeah, come out. Just, well, let us know when you come up. We'll get together and we'll show you what we're doing and stuff. So it just seems that, then the whole thought of, a large hairy creature out there wandering around, it's just, it's exciting. The whole idea, the whole legend of this thing being out there, which is the legend go back for, actually the whole thing. I mean, when I was doing my second book, International Legend Tribune, I was really surprised how many stories of these large hairy creatures are all over the world, not necessarily just in, the Yeti. Of course, like you said, you got the Yowie down in Australia, which I hooked up with a team down there, or a research group, and I tell you, they couldn't, help me enough. It was really great. What they, with my book, you got the Yeren over in China. You got the Almista or Alma up in Russia. I mean, they're seen all over the place, and I mean, it's just very exciting to be part of the whole research for this unknown cryptid.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I recently just talked to Gareth Patterson down in South Africa as well, researching this creature called the Otang.
Mm-hmm.
There just seems to be a lot of legends all over the world when it comes to this sort of thing, and very specific sort of environments, which is pretty interesting. They're not completely universal, right? People aren't reporting seeing them in big urban areas or in parts of Western Europe. I mean, there are stories in the UK as well, and I don't know. I'm personally a little more on the skeptical side when it comes to
the wild man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's maybe some type of a memory of people interacting with things like Neanderthals, like the stories of the trolls and ogres up in Scandinavia. Were those just Neanderthals that maybe survived longer, and then those stories lingered on to like the Middle Ages? I don't know. There's a lot to think about there. But yeah, you're right. Well, that's what's so interesting about this field is there's so many great folks and great teams all over the place. I've experienced much of the same thing wherever we end up going. I mean, as you know, I've been talking to you and a bunch of the folks down in Florida. There's just so many great people that are like, yeah, we'll hook you up with this person, or you're going here, we'll tell you about this. Come out with us, and very like welcoming. And I think that's really awesome. There's just a lot of that. There's in some ways there's not really a Bigfoot community, because if you look at the online stuff, it's not really a community, but there are Bigfoot communities out there, and I think that's pretty cool. But definitely interesting. We've got Matt Larson in the chat. What's going on, buddy? Central Florida Bigfoot. He says, Robert, good to see you on here. Yep. Matt is awesome.
He is.
Bill brings up a good point. He says Bigfoot conventions nowadays draw in thousands. Yeah, the subject has gotten a lot more popular. You've had stuff like Finding Bigfoot, obviously, and everything that's come in the wake of it, and just the popularity has skyrocketed for sure, and just with other cryptids as well, I've noticed. But Bigfoot's the star. So kind of breaking down. Go ahead if you have something to add.
No, I just say you're right. I mean, you had In Search Of back in the 70s, which again, that was another show that kind of got me going. In fact, Ripley's had a museum in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, called World of the Unexplained. And when you first walked in, there was a statue of Bigfoot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
And later, of course, you got other shows. You got Monster Quest, fantastic. In fact, I think I got most of them on DVD. Mysterious Encounters with Autumn Williams, and which I got a bootleg copy of that one. And of course, Seth Breedlove's series on there. I mean, what I think I like about Seth is versus some of these other shows. Well, that's not taken away. But Seth has a general. I met Seth years ago when he was down in Falk,
right?
And I could see, him and his dad, and I could see that he right there had a strong interest in it, and because of that, he's just not there just making a video. I mean, Seth has a strong interest in all this cryptids as much as all of us do.
Yeah, yeah, that's I think been the difference I've noticed. I've worked with people in the sort of entertainment industry and that sort of thing, and I know some of those characters, and they don't really care about the subject matter, right? At the end of the day, especially if you look at the reality TV stuff, it's not about the subject; it's about creating drama for a show. And you can talk to many of the people that have been on those shows, and they know the producers all think it's BS, so they're not really into it.
Yeah.
Whereas, that's what I think Seth and I really joined forces a few years ago, back in 2015, 16, because we both had an interest in the topic. And I love what he was doing. And I think now that there's people that are really into doing these films and covering these topics because they have a passion for it, as opposed to just another topic, I think is great. There's other folks like Justin Chernopesky over in Mountain Beast Mysteries, lots of other folks out there that are doing that. And I think the people have been starved for that sort of thing. They grew up on, as you mentioned, In Search of and others, and Monster Quest is a good example. That's probably the last show I remember that was really on TV that was actually trying to take the subject seriously, at least most of them. And, that's Doug Hychek, who is well known as not, is actually interested in these topics and has been researching it before and after the show. Doug is a force. I mean, I've had him on the show as well, and he's a good friend, and he's definitely doing a lot of cool stuff. But I think that's what's so great about being able to put the message out straight to the people. With the internet, in some aspects it's good, some aspects it's bad, but I think that good kind of outweighs the bad when it comes to people being able to connect that have that shared interest. And
I was gonna say, about you saying doing shows where the people, like when I did wife swap.
Yeah.
I mean, the camera guy and the other guys really had an interest in this stuff, but
sure.
The other crew, they could care less. And I mean, when we were supposed to go out and really go film in an area, they didn't want to go all the way out there because, oh man, we just got told there's panthers and stuff out there. I said, yeah, there might be, but we're not going to see them. We drive out there with our vehicles and making all this noise. We're not going to see them, And so, I mean, and like you said, reality TV it's not real,
No.
And that, I mean, I did the show because I was a big fan of that show, Destination Truth, with Josh Gates. And they called and invited me to do the show. And I said, oh, I'm going to get an opportunity to see what it's like to, Josh Gates and all that. And it was, I came out a lot smarter, like I said, I would never do another show like that.
Right.
Because, the whole, it wasn't real.
Right.
I mean, when we were out in the woods, we really weren't out, where the real sightings happened. It was just, it was all just to get something on camera and stuff. And if you look at me, you can see how irritated I am about the whole thing, because I was just like, there's nothing out here, guys. Why are we filming out here? Well, we don't want to drive all the way out there. Said,
and that's because it's more convenient for the production to do it at that location, as opposed to actually going into a location where it's not easy to get into or whatever. And that's something I've talked to Cliff and Bobo about as well. Is I think they did the best they could with the limitations they had. When you had all these people running on the woods, because those guys, as many that'll know them, they're squatchers before and after the show for sure. But most shows they don't do that, and they just. You mentioned even if the lower down sort of guys are into the subjects, ultimately it's the higher ups that override the decision making. And what happened was actually reality TV is a lot cheaper to produce than something like a Monster Quest. So when all the networks made that switch to reality TV, stuff like Monster Quest, which pretty big budgets per episodes, and there was actual science going on.
Yeah,
that fell on the wayside for stuff like $10 million Bigfoot bounty and other things. And I know some of the folks that were on that show as well, and they're great.
I know Stacy and them and David.
Good people, but it's, you can talk to any of them about their experiences, and they'll tell you kind of what you said. It's not real. It's almost like, yeah, sure, you kind of sign to the devil. You get paid to go out to these places and do all this stuff, but it sort of just is what it is. And that's something I've heard time and time again, and I've had kind of a bad experience with production company myself in that way as well. So I know how it kind of goes, and I know people who work in that industry too, because I went to school for it. And there's definitely some characters, people I wouldn't really trust all that much. But anyway, aside from that, Peggy says in the comments, I saw Robert speak at the first annual Great Florida Bigfoot Conference this past July. Very interesting presentation. Loved it. Yeah, thanks, Peggy. Yeah, the new or the conference is coming up here in January, actually.
Yeah, we sure do. We got some really awesome speakers for it. I won't be speaking. I'll be part of a panel. Myself, Stacy Brown, Dave Sadati. We're going to be part of I think a question and answer panel. If I understood that right.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Ashley brings up a good point. She says it's a thin defining line between education and entertainment. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's really tough because most of the time when you're doing Bigfoot research, it's not that interesting. I mean, to the lay person. So when we do our documentaries, and you'll see when we go out there, for Beyond the Trail, we like to go out to these locations. We're not like kind of pussyfooting around like these crews are with TV stuff. We are actually basically just dudes with cameras that hike out and want to do this stuff. So the problem is, how do you condense that into something that people are actually going to watch? So I try as much as I can to sort of err on that side of showing these environments and talking about stuff going on. If we have stuff happen, we'll show it. If not, we're not going to embellish it or put creepy music like these shows will. Edutainment, yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, so it's definitely a thin line for sure. There's a lot there. But yeah, so all right, I want to get into Skunk Ape. So, man, there's just so much I could cover with this topic, but let's just start with you. What do you think about the skunk ape in general? I mean,
well,
expand from that, yeah.
Florida is number 3 for Bigfoot sightings in the United States. Now that can change, you know what I mean? Because we were almost up there with California. I mean, California may end up having more one week, and then we'll be back up there and stuff. Only Washington and Oregon always are at the top 2 for Bigfoot sightings. Of course, here in Florida, it's referred to as the skunk ape. There's been many investigators here in Florida. The animal averages about, from what I did looking at newspaper articles that go all the way back to the 70s, when MC Osborne was interviewed, he saw it in Big Cypress Swamp down in the Everglades, and he specifically said it's called the skunk ape. And of course, it's called that because of the smell that the animal had. It comes from the animal, the really putrid smell, which you don't always smell it. It doesn't always give off a smell. But it averages about 8 foot tall. It's light brownish hair, and that was probably due to the environment down here in Florida being, hot and swampy area versus over on the West Coast where it's, foresty and the cooler environment. It doesn't seem to be also as bulky as the Bigfoot that's seen over on the West Coast. I had a woman, interesting story. We're over in the Swanee River with another guy. We were Bigfoot hunting out there. He had a cabin and stuff. And we were going into this place called Treasure Camp. That was the name of the restaurant. And we went in there for breakfast. And the guy was always going in there in the morning, to the waitresses, bragging on what we were doing. I think he was trying. I guess he thinks that the waitresses were going to be impressed with us or something. But anyway, he was, they knew what we were there for, And we came in one morning, and the manager came up and said, "Hey, you may want to go talk to that couple over there. I think they saw something." So I look over and I see this couple, middle-aged couple, both dressed in camouflage, and the lady is just crying and, pointing her finger at her husband's face, and he's trying to, calm her down and stuff. And look at my friend, said, "Should we go over and talk to him?" He goes, "I don't know, man. She looks awfully upset." I said, "Well, let's go for it. Let's just go. I mean, if she doesn't want to talk, we'll leave her alone. No problem." So I get up, I walk over, introduce myself, and I said, I heard you may have seen Bigfoot. And she just almost jumped out of her seat at her husband. I told you that was Bigfoot. I told you, I never wanted to come out here, And long story short, he took her out hunting for her first time out in the woods hunting, went down the Swanee River on a boat, put her in a tree stand, and then he took off and went to another tree stand. She sat up there, fell asleep, felt something tugging on the ladder, woke up, looked down, and saw this large, hairy creature staring up at her. And she looked at it she says it felt like forever, but she said it was only probably a couple seconds. And then she started screaming for her husband. and she said the thing walked off.
Hmm.
Did it walk off real quickly? So I said, no, it just walked off casual like. And she said it had a kind of a very human, that had a human face. It was very, she said she could see the muscle pattern on the creature. It was very much in shape. And it walked off, and then her husband came up, and they said it felt like it took him an hour to get her off the tree stand because she wasn't coming down. He said basically she wasn't coming down until she knew Bigfoot was off the planet. She was just petrified. And he, got her down, got her in the boat, and got her, came down to the restaurant where we in turn ran into him. And then we, I asked them where, if they could show us what happened. Of course, she's like, "Are you crazy? I'm never going in the woods again." I said, "Well, if you could show it, tell us where, these tree stands are at." So me and my friend got into his boat and we went down there, but we didn't find the tree stands. I don't think they gave us the right directions. But that whole area, though, what the manager told me, that that isn't the only incident where some people, hunters or fishermen, have seen what they refer to them as large monkeys or large apes out there. So I was taken back how she, her just, I mean, she was very very descriptive. And it was one of the things when I interview people, whether or not they're telling me the truth, making this whole thing up, or if they're being truthful, it's the detail. I mean, I've had another gentleman tell me a story, and they can tell you everything they did that day. And whenever you ask them a question, there is no pause like, how tall was it? Oh, I don't know. Oh, it was tall. It was taller, a lot taller than my husband. A great deal taller than mine. It was able to put its hand almost to the top of the tree stand. I mean, that's how she was able to describe it. I could see its muscles. The thing was, I could see it was a muscular thing. And it had a human face. I said, "Did it give you a mean look?" And she said, "No, it kind of gave me," she said, "it looked kind of just a blank look on its face looking up at me." Of course, it took a while because, again, she was hysterical. Yeah. And she would lose her composure a couple times and stuff. And I said, "Well, if you don't want to say anything, no." And she, "No, I'll tell you. Right. But, and again, I've never seen her come on TV or anything. So, I mean, she definitely wasn't out for the publicity of it. And same thing with another gentleman I saw. And in fact, he even said, and he took a film of it with his cell phone. And he said, "I'll let you have a copy, but don't give a copy away." He says, "I'm not interested in being on TV or anything. I know what I saw. I don't need, to prove it." So these animals seen all over Florida. I mean, they're seen even outside of, there's a place called the Green Swamp, which is north of me, up north of Lakeland. Yeah. And it borders up to Disney property, believe it or not. If you look at it. So, and of course, Ocala National Forest is probably, I consider, the hotbed. There's a lot of activity. And also down in the Everglades, where Dave Shealy has his Skunk Ape headquarters down there. And I go down and see Dave every now and then. Dave is a wealth of information. What I like about Dave is Dave doesn't keep any sightings to himself or locations. I said, "Dave, what happened?" "Oh, I had a couple come in today. They were on 75. They saw it and stuff." I said, "Where at?" "Oh, here, give me a map. I'll show you." You ask him, he'll tell you. He doesn't keep it all, to himself, right. Which I thought is real, pretty cool. This animal's been seen very close to NASA out of Merritt Island.
Cape Canaveral, huh?
There's been a lot of signs up in the Panhandle near Toya State Park, where I've done some investigations with Stacy Brown. I was with him when he found those footprints of his over on the Bridges property. I remember that night. We had divided into teams, and I decided I wanted to go see caves. And we went out and didn't see anything at the caves. Came back and found out two of the other investigators out there actually had an incident out there at the Bridges house where the thing screamed at them. And I mean, it rattled these two guys bad to where one ended up leaving. He said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And the other guy said, "Man, I'll never shake that sound as long as I live. I mean, I'm not going in the woods by myself anymore, Yeah. And we went the next morning, and then we found footprints, So, I mean, I was like, holy cow, they really did see something, So,
yeah, it's what's so interesting, you're talking about these witnesses, especially the ones that don't really want anything to do with the story. Maybe they'll tell you when they trust you. That's one of the biggest things that keeps me going, is talking to people that they'll get discouraged with the craziness and the hoaxing and the stuff that goes on. but then somebody will reach out to me, or I'll get a lead for a local up in my area here in New Hampshire that's a witness, where you get that story, and it's so hard to understand why somebody would want to, unless they're truly mistaken about what they saw, but why they would come up with such a fantastical story that they just practically sit on, that you have to almost pull teeth just to get details out of. But that's one of those things. That's, I think, the biggest factor that kind of keeps me interested in the topic. If it's not, finding your own sort of evidence or experiences, that's one of the things that I think is pretty interesting. I did want to read this comment from Jonathan. He says, "Man, I hope Disney doesn't get its hooks in Bigfoot." They've had them in a few. I think there was like Goofy's Adventure or something had Bigfoot in it a while ago.
Oh, the Goofy movie, yeah.
Yes, yeah, there was a Bigfoot in there, and
in fact, I have they.
Oh, there you go. That's the one. Yeah, exactly.
I bought this in Germany, believe it. This Germany was giving this out in the Happy Meals, and lo and behold, I still have it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. As Peggy says, Disney already has the Yeti on Mount Everest at Animal Kingdom. Yeah, that's awesome. I remember going that.
It's not working anymore. It just it doesn't move anymore. It just they just flash a light on it when you go in there.
Yeah, and it's up in there. I remember that ride, and I remember Lauren Coleman was kind of one of the consultants for some of that
he was.
research they had on there. Obviously, he wrote a lot of the stuff on Tom Slick and those guys. So really interesting. But one thing I wanted to circle back on about the skunk ape in particular is there was a time 20, 30 years ago where Bigfoot was thought of as typically in the Pacific Northwest. And there was a few places outside of the Pacific Northwest and into Canada that Bigfoot was sort of well known. Ohio was sort of there, I would argue, but Florida, for some reason, the skunk ape, maybe it's just that name. The skunk ape just seems very, I don't know, it's got certain appeal to it, and it sort of broke that mold. And allow me to just go on a little skunk ape tangent here, because I've been knee deep in swamp water, metaphorically speaking, not yet, but doing all this research. To me, I look at Florida as a very fascinating place, not only because of the history, but you see how it's this land area that I think it's 180 miles wide at the widest, and it juts out into obviously the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, into the Caribbean, really, how close it is to Cuba. So you have a confined space, but you have, to this day, places like the Everglades that are one of the largest wilderness protected areas east of the Rocky Mountains to this day. I mean, and right next door you have Miami, this huge party town. And then you have, I've been looking up the population growth in Florida. I mean, 100 years ago, there was less than 1 million people. And now, I mean, what's the population now? It's the fourth most populated state in the U.S.
And we got more people coming in every day.
It's ballooning. And not only has it always been typically, especially for those of us up here in the Northeast, as the place for people to go retire in. I mean, I know people that are retiring to Florida and have been for years, but now a lot of people are going to Florida for other reasons as well. Just the population is expanding. And I wonder how that impacts these natural areas, because having been down to Florida, you see that there's still a lot of really wild places, but then you wonder about the corridors. Are these animals able to move through areas? How does that work? I mean, just give us your thoughts on that.
We have a lot of river. Like we have in Meyer, we have the Peace River and the Withlacoochee River, and they're all surrounded by it. And we have a lot of state parks around here. And interestingly enough, Disney and Universal, they have an agreement with Florida. Whenever they build anything, they also have to buy property that nothing gets done on it, that stays.
Oh, wow.
And Disney has a big, huge, I guess I could say huge, wooded area out near Point Siena. And the state takes care of it, but Disney had to purchase it, and there's nothing that can be done. I mean, they have there's trails and stuff out there to go walk around and stuff. But so, I mean, yeah, interestingly enough, back in the 60s and 70s, there was a lady by the name of Ramona Clark Hibner, and she was a big investigator down here, and she hated the term skunk ape. She called it the Yeti. She used the term Yeti.
Really interesting.
Referring to it as. Anyway, she was writing back and forth to John Green, And in his book, John even said at the beginning he just didn't see it feasible there being a creature like that down in Florida.
Right.
And he went down and hooked up with Ramona and her husband, and they took her out, and he turned around and said, "Holy cow! I didn't realize how much is out there." And there is an area out here for this animal to, or there's a tribe or a population of these animals to live down here.
Right.
I mean, Ocala, and if you ever get up near the Panhandle, it's just, you're like, holy cow, look at all these wooded areas. But don't get me wrong, on the flip side, there is a lot of construction going on here in Florida, but most of it seems to be around the Orlando area, around that, off of 27 and stuff. It doesn't seem to really be, thank God it hasn't, gone into the green swamp where we go, or down in the like the Everglades. There's just no way you're going to be able to do any really building down in that area.
You have to drain the area, right? I mean,
yeah, and there are parts of Florida you just can't build on. It's all swampy, And you get up to, the border of Georgia, where Okefenokee, and you just can't build out there,
Right.
So that's where these animals may just be, and there are reports of them being out there too.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, I've talked to Matt. I've had him on the show before about, the green swamp in particular. I know he goes to that area. He says Central Florida is an amazing space. Yeah, Florida is not just one entity. You have that Everglades area, just totally different. I mean, there's different, a lot of it, it's not dry ground. And then you do have up in Ocala, it's that sugar sand, right? I remember going camping there last winter when I was down in Florida with my girlfriend, and we took a trip down there, and we went to the beach for a day and for a weekend, and then kind of did some camping. And even how populated Florida is, you really can find some spots that nobody else is in, which is incredible. But as I was talking about earlier, I do have that conflicting feeling where I say, well, you look at places like the Panhandle and the Osceola Forest, National Forest, which links up into Georgia. If there's animals in that area, other creatures, Bigfoots, whatever, other animals, they can move into kind of the rest of the continental United States from there if they choose so. But if you're in an area like the Everglades, as massive as it is, I mean, it's larger than the state of Rhode Island. If you combine the Everglades National Park and this big cypress, maybe there's enough resources for a number of these things to exist. And if you're of the belief that they're flesh and blood, as I am, I suppose, I'm not trying to go on like a tirade here, make it seem like I know what I'm talking about. I've just been going through these questions because I've been looking into, obviously, as you know, all this Florida stuff, but that Central Florida area is really interesting too, as Matt was saying. So, I mean, any thoughts on that kind of?
Well, down in the Everglades, there are places that, and Dave Shealy will tell you that the humans have never been.
Right.
The area is massive, and you really got to know what you're doing going in there. It's very easy to get lost and get disoriented. And of course, being down in the Gulf, it's warm down there now. I mean, and in the summertime, the mosquitoes will just tear you up down there. Yeah. I mean, they got these gigantic mosquitoes that, nothing works on them, as far as bug spray and stuff. And, when I went out with Dave one day looking around, I said, oh my God, I didn't realize it was that big out here. He goes, oh, Rob, you haven't seen nothing yet. This is barely anything. Yeah. So, I mean, and, you got an animal that's trying to avoid humans and all that. It's a great area for it to be,
Right.
Go ahead.
No, you're right. It's just such a fascinating kind of thing to look at. And like I said, I've been just so kind of obsessively looking into it, as I always like to do before we go on a trip. We've been to so many of these different places. And in general, if you just kind of study different areas, you'll be surprised at how much is there. And I don't think people realize how much is truly in the Everglades there. And I've only been once when I was a kid, so I'm really looking forward to being back there. But we're also hoping to go to all these other places. And as you were talking about Ocala, that was one of my favorite places to camp I've been in. It was amazing, the environment. Well, not what you'd expect for Florida at all.
An interesting thing you were talking about it, when I was doing research on it, the thing really didn't take notice. I mean, it's been seen way before. In fact, I think there's been sightings that actually predate any sightings of Bigfoot on the West Coast. Of course, there's been settlers on the, in Florida, the Spanish, the British, and all that.
Right.
But there's always been stories of these, swamp giants or wild men. And it wasn't until the Patterson video came out, or film, excuse me, that people went, wait a minute, we've got one of those out here, you know. And even though Mr. Osborne coined the term, well, I'm not going to say he coined it, he told a reporter skunk ape. Dave Shealy said his dad and his granddad had been referring to it as a skunk ape. But in a newspaper article, I also had it referred to as the Everglades ape.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So the sightings have been going back for, I think, since, we've had settlers. And of course, the Native Americans, the Seminoles, the Masuki, and the I forget the name of the other tribe, they all have stories of this animal,
Right.
And, I was talking to Seminoles, and they pretty much want us to leave it alone. So you leave it alone. It's not doing anything to you, So
that's what I've seen from what I've gathered too. And I would love to speak to, folks obviously from that background too. Yeah, there's a lot of questions coming in. I do want to talk about the Florida panther a little bit because I think it's an interesting parallel, but we'll get to that maybe after a few questions. Now, there's a little bit of a conversation going on about invasive species down in Florida, and SOCOM Smith asks, has the exotic pet trade been banned yet?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I know certain animals have, of course, with the big python thing that we had down here, which they're still having yearly roundups where they'll go out and get them. But I mean, a couple of years ago, I went down to a friend of mine down in near Naples, and they took over to meet a gentleman, and he was an exotic pet dealer. He had lemurs and snakes. I mean, this guy had cobras, and oh God, that scared the tar out of me. These cobras and all kinds of other things. But I do know you have to have a $500 permit to have an exotic pet down here, and certain ones have been outlawed now. You cannot have a tiger or lion anymore.
Yeah.
And I believe they've stopped you having any kind of chimpanzees and stuff, because we had an incident, I think, down here where I think somebody, a lady had one, and it attacked another lady, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was down here in Florida. But they still are, if you got a $500 permit, but there's just certain creatures, like piranha. You can't have piranhas down here in your aquariums. That's a big no-go.
Right. Obviously, people are talking about Carol Baskin and Tiger King in the comments.
Oh, that I have never. I mean, I don't live too far up there from where she's at, but I've never been over there to, I mean,
it's.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as Florida obviously has that reputation, the whole Florida man meme and all that stuff but the invasive species, because it is, I mean, really a tropical area in a lot of areas. I mean, the Everglades is kind of considered to be the Amazon of North America, that it's such a conducive environment for animals from South and Central and, Asia and Africa to live in if they're released. I mean, the stories about chimps and orangutans in the Everglades, you've got, I remember driving past Crystal Springs last year up in like kind of northern Florida. There's a state park where there's just these monkeys, I think macaques, that have been living there for
there's a monkey island.
Yeah, they escaped from like a zoo, and they're just hundreds of them now, and they terrorize people in the park, and will you got
Monkey World
stuff.
Yeah, you got Monkey World near Miami. And interesting enough, they do have a couple silverbacks, and there was a photo floating not too long ago. Supposedly, somebody said it was a skunk ape they took down in Everglades City. And I used to know the lady that worked there. I haven't talked to her in a while, but I sent her the picture. I said, "Hey, what does this look like to you?" And because it looks like a silverback, all it does is look like a silverback poking his head around a tree.
Yeah.
And she turned around and sent me two more photos of the same thing. She goes, "That's some of these recirculating photos that we have." That's she named the name of the silverback that it was that the picture was taken of. But we have we do have like I said, near north of me, I forget the name of the place where these exotic pet owners take their chimpanzees. These chimpanzees hit puberty to get violent, and
like a sanctuary.
Take him to this place. In fact, I think rumor control is Michael Jackson's chimp is there now, or has been there for years. We have a place where there's elephants at.
Yeah.
And I remember one night when I was out with BRFO with Matt, we were walking around, my wife and I. heard a roar, and I said, that sounds like a doggone lion. You know, I said, I don't know if I want to be out here if there's, you know, there's a lion. And come to find out, there was a lady on the property. I think that one found out that she owned a lion, and you could hear it roaring at night. You know, so
yeah, wow. It's out of control. I think it just adds to the mystery. You know, you're out in there in the Everglades. There's already enough things. The American alligator obviously is iconic in Florida. You've got the American crocodile as well. Parts of it in Florida. The copperheads, you know, cottonmouth snakes. Obviously, as I mentioned, the Florida panther, but it sucks that there's a lot of these invasive species. That Peggy brings up a good point. She lives in Florida, as she was saying in the comments, but she says we have a big problem with iguanas too. Not as scary as snakes,
down near Miami. Yep.
But they eat bird eggs and they have a detrimental effect, and that's the problem. Is they're, you know, and then as Kevin brings up as well, the problem with the invasive pythons, they're taking out small mammals, and even alligators are being taken. So it has it's us having a big impact on these environments, which really sucks.
We also have the Nile monitors. We have an issue with them down near Cape Coral. And I remember talking to a park ranger or a ranger about it. And he, to tell you how bad they are, they got a phone call from a woman saying there was a dinosaur on her property. And her husband, I guess, was a doctor. She called her husband. Her husband came out. He said he had saw a large lizard running into the woods. Yeah. And the ranger, you know, police showed up and they got a hold of Fish and Wildlife, and they came out and found the tracks, and they said it was a Nile monitor. And they said, well, what's it coming around here? And the lady owned a cat, and these things like to eat cats. And I guess it saw the cat in the window, and it was going, you know, circling around the house. But they took measurements and said this thing was over 12 feet long, a Nile monitor, and they never did catch it. So, I mean, that's another, you know, animal down here that we have to contend with, to the Nile monitor, and they're mean.
Yeah, it's like a mini Komodo dragon, basically.
Yes, and they will bite you.
And with a lot of reptiles, they don't really have a limit to how much they can grow. It depends on the environment, how much food they can get. So if they have infinite resources, I mean, they could basically, you know, have free reign. As Upper Canada says, freaking dragons. And then Mothman 46 asks, are nutria in Florida yet? I'd assume so, right?
Nutria, what's that?
They're like those, it's like they're a large rodent, sort of swamp, like a beaver without a tail. Do you guys have those down there?
I don't know. I mean, we have a gigantic hog population down here.
Right, and that's another invasive species.
So we've always said that was a food source for the skunk ape, but it's you know, we have year-round hunting allowed for hogs. You know. Yeah.
And those are a big problem across much of the southern U.S. with the hogs, which were brought in. I mean, to remind people, because a lot of people think that hogs are native to places like Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana, but they're technically invasive too, and they breed like crazy. They're one of the most dangerous animals down there. When I'm in the South, I'm not, you know, up here I'm worried about moose in my neck of the woods. Down there, it's gators and hogs, and I guess nutria. I know they have them in Louisiana. As Mothman says, they're kind of like capybaras, sort of similar. Yeah, we've seen evidence of them in Louisiana and other places, but I guess maybe they haven't made it to Florida, which is good because there's enough invasive stuff. But on that note, I do want to talk about a non-invasive animal that is the Florida panther. I mean, obviously Florida Panthers are really big culturally. The Florida Panthers team, I mean, they're a big deal, right?
I had an incident with my wife years ago. I was in the Green Swamp, and I went down this one trail. I probably wasn't supposed to go down. It was one of those ranger trails.
Okay.
And I went down there, and I put up a trail camera next to this creek that was running through the area. Okay. So we came back. I went to retrieve the camera, and I got in the Jeep, and my wife's sitting there toying with her camera. And we look up, and a black panther came walking out of the woods and walked right across, didn't even look up at us. And walked across and went to the other side, and both me and her just sat there and awe, just like. And then all of a sudden, my wife goes, "Oh my God, we had a camera and we didn't do anything." You know, we were just so taken back that this animal, you know. And we went over to the game warden, because in the Green Swamp over in East Track and West Track, they have game wardens when you go in. And I had mentioned to him, he goes, "Oh, you saw it too?" "Yeah, we've had some people. Did you just see it?" He goes, "Wait a minute, you're not supposed to be down that road." I said, "Oh, really?"
Oops.
I was like, "Oops, I didn't know that.
Didn't see the sign.
You know, So he goes, yeah, don't be going down there no more. He says, where did you see it? I said, over by that little metal bridge, you guys. Yeah, I know exactly where you're seeing it. Okay, got it. But I mean, he believed me. I didn't sit there and go, oh no, you're mistaken. And then I had, whenever you see a panther here in Florida, you're supposed to call Florida Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, right. That's
And when I called them, they basically told me no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You saw a bobcat. I said, no, sir. This thing was a lot. I know what the bobcats look down. This thing was a lot darker. It was large. It looked like a mountain lion, a black mountain lion.
Right, right.
Hip bounds moving and went across. He goes, no, you didn't. We don't have. There's no black panthers in the Green Swamp. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm never going to call you guys now. You know, if you're going to, I didn't have to call you. I'm doing this.
Sure.
And then, so anyway.
Well, I mean, I've worked on the mountain lion stuff here in the Northeast for a while and done a project on it. And it's so interesting. I've talked to other people like Michael Mays of the NAWAC. He's really interested in down in, that part of the South. They report mountain lions, which aren't supposed to be there, unlike Florida or like up where I'm at. Mountain lions are not supposed to be here officially. But people see them and they also see these black panthers. So it's a really interesting phenomenon. And that's what Florida in particular is the only place in the eastern U.S. that has an officially recognized mountain lion population. I mean, they're obviously called the Florida panthers. They're a subspecies of Puma concolor, which is the North American variant of the mountain lions. And they're obviously very emblematic. But I got to read this comment from Tate. He says, Florida sounds more and more like that trench in that scene from Peter Jackson's King Kong. Between the gators and the hogs and the bugs and the tigers.
There are parts of that do kind of resemble that scene, yes.
That's awesome. I just had to read that. But as Glenn H. says, only $500 to ruin an entire ecosystem. It's unfortunate, but that's what people do, right? We ruin things. It's so interesting. But I've been looking up the Florida... Well, I guess it's the Florida Wildlife Commission. Is that what they're called?
Mm-hmm. Florida Fish and Wildlife, yes.
Yeah, I've been looking up their website for panther sightings, and people have right in the almost downtown Naples and areas abutting Miami on their trail cameras in their yard. They'll get panthers walking right through. It's really actually pretty fascinating.
There seems to be more activity in South Florida with panthers than there is up north, to my knowledge. I mean, I don't remember the last panther sighting. Well, no, I'll take it back. When I was over in Lake Wales, there's a place called Tiger Creek Preserve. And the tiger actually is named after an old Seminole Native American chief. Yeah. But anyway, we found tracks. And I was with Bigfoot Dave Miller, and we were out there. And it's a funny story. When we went out there, we went out real early in the morning. It was still dark because this area, you're not allowed to do any camping. But you can walk.
Yeah.
You just can't camp. And this dog came out of nowhere, had a leash on, and we couldn't get rid of it. It just stayed with us. So we said, what the heck, And we were walking, all of a sudden this animal, it just stopped. Like it sensed something in front of us. And I pull out my FLIR, and I'm looking around, and, I couldn't see anything. And Dave's with his night vision. And we couldn't, and then the animal just started acting, But on the way back, we look over, and we found some panther tracks.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I went, holy cow, you think that was a panther that dog picked up? And he goes, could have been, But I had bear mace, so I was, I was prepared.
Sure. That's so special. I mean, I've heard a lot of people that have had encounters in Florida, and they'll find the tracks often more than seeing the animal. And, for me personally, it would just be so cool to be able to experience one of those animals. I love mountain lions. After doing all the research on them, I've gained such an appreciation. But, it's really, really just an interesting topic. I'm sure we could talk about that on itself, but I do want to give people the chance to ask some questions. So I know there were some questions in the chat, and if you guys just please remember, at least put part of the question in all caps, because the chat, there's a lot of people talking, there's a lot of stuff going on. But Joe Terry, what's going on? He asks, hey, Alex, question for Robert. What's your take on wood knocks, legit or not?
Okay, legit or not, I think there's something to them.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I had an incident not too long ago. Me and my wife went out one day. We went walking down the Florida Trail, and we got to a point. My wife said, okay, I've had enough. Let's turn around and go back. And we had no sooner turned and went back, and then bang, we heard it. My wife went, holy cow, did you hear that? That was something hidden the side of a tree, And I was like, and I kept thinking, I wonder if that was a signal to the other, population out there that, the humans were leaving the area.
Right.
I mean, a lot of primates, even, orangutans and all that, have been known to pick up sticks and bang them against, the wood, especially orangutan. So, I mean, this animal is, very intelligent. And that's what I try to tell a lot of people when they're out looking for it. You can't treat it like you're looking for a bear or anything like that. It's a very intelligent creature. It reasons, it has a pattern to it, how it lives, and it knows how to communicate, avoid humans and how to communicate to other ones besides, screaming and stuff. So I think there's something to the wood knocks.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting. I've experienced them. I've heard them plenty of times. It's weird. I mean, I know there's a little bit of a debate there, but I think a lot of folks would argue, it has something to do with Sasquatch. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but something is going on. What it is, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for the question, Joe. Mothman, he said this earlier, but he said, I have my signed copy of Legend tripping right here beside me. Awesome.
Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is a question from Kevin. Really interesting. I'm glad you're asking this, Kevin. He asked this earlier, but we're getting to it now. He says, the one famous pic of a swamp ape looks a lot like an orangutan, but PNW Bigfoot tend to look like PADI. Does Robert have thoughts on this? He said, you're kind of answered it, but
yeah, it's called the Micah Skunk Ape photo. Back in, I hope I'm right on the date, 2000, the Sarasota police received this envelope with 2 photographs and a letter from a elderly lady that this ape, she never called it Bigfoot or skunk ape or anything. She thought it was, in fact, she even, if you read the letter, she's asking if this ape had gotten loose from a zoo or something. But if you look at the photos, it does look something like an orangutan, but it does look a little bit different too. My take is, and the jury's still out on that one. I mean, that area, Micah, has had a lot of sightings. You can talk to Stacy Brown about it. He's been down there. In fact, he was down there not too long ago. I couldn't go out. I had to work that weekend. But Mike has had some, a lot of activity down in that area. So I think there's probably something to these photographs. I know Lauren Coleman actually owns the photographs. I don't know how he got them, if they just sent them to him, but he owns them and he puts them out there. And he told me he put them out there hoping that the owner will try to sue him so we can find out who put the photographs out.
Get some more details, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely looks like a real creature. Matt Moneymaker told me he thought the whole thing, it was photographs of a orangutan taken at a nature preserve that somebody was trying to pass off. So, I mean, It's possible, but it doesn't quite look like an orangutan. It looks a little bit, different. So I think I always tell everybody the jury's still out on those photographs.
Yeah, I mean, they've been out for a long time. Mm-hmm. Probably that's what kind of made Mayaca a famous area. And I've actually been down there too. I was down there around 2012 or 2013. A friend of mine, we were down there. I was visiting him. And we went to Mayaca. I wasn't into the Bigfoot stuff publicly then. I just kind of knew about it a little bit. And the week after I got back, there was that photo of supposedly the one that was seen in the field where all the people were pulling over and taking pictures of it. And
I bet
a whole big incident.
Yeah, when I filmed that, and I talked to him, and he had an old flip top phone, and whenever he films, it looked further away than where the creature was, and he said I could see it. It was running like a human, so
right.
And I believe him, the way he was told the story. I mean, in that area, like I said, it's known for it. So
yeah, and it's just something interesting. I mean, I don't know. I'd see that photo to me personally, and I have a lot of questions. While yes, it kind of does look like an orangutan, it doesn't at the same time. And I'm actually going to pull up the photo here just so folks kind of know what we're talking about. Folks that haven't seen it probably have seen it, pretty familiar.
Yeah, there's 2 of them out there.
There's 2 of them, right? And this is kind of that main view.
The woman was putting stuff on her porch, trying to lure it out so she can. And then I don't think I'm trying to remember how the letter was. She heard it, and I guess she just pointed her camera out there and started taking pictures. And when she had it developed, you could see, these pictures
Yeah.
came out. And she basically just tried to get the police aware that this animal was out there. Problem is, she didn't leave any return address. I mean, I'm not sure it's because the woman maybe elderly and just forgot to do that or what, but unfortunately, Matt told me because of that, the lack of an address and stuff, it makes the whole picture suspect.
Right. That's kind of the way I lean towards it. The fact that there aren't any other details, nobody ever came forward, but at the same time, it's a strange hoax. I mean, I don't know what was to gain there. To me personally, what it reminds me of is those sort of Gigantopithecus displays that have been made in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's the closest thing I could say. I mean, I don't know. It's possible to do a hoax like this for sure, or just for fun or whatever. There's definitely a lot of questions. Tate says that's an old photo of Eli Watson. Could be if Eli's watching. But definitely an interesting one. And yeah, that whole Mayaka area, that's another one of those, as you're talking about, just spots where there's a long history just beyond that. But Leon is actually asking a question, Bigfoot Okanagan. He says, what about the free orangutans and chimpanzee colonies that are in the southeast of the states? Have you heard anything about that?
No, I mean, we had some animals after Hurricane Andrew that got loose. I mean, there's areas where you'll find spider monkeys. I mean, when I was living in Okeechobee, my kids ran in, said there's a monkey in the tree. I went back there. There was a doggone spider monkey back there, and I went over to get the neighbor. And I said, "Hey, what's the deal on the spider monkey?" But when we came back, it was gone. And he said, "Oh yeah, you'll see them every once in a while." The chimpanzees, like I said, they're all in this one area, to my knowledge. The orangutans, like I said, some people think the skunk ape is nothing, is actually an orangutan because of that. But the orangutan averages about 6 feet is the tallest one they get, and that's from I believe that comes from Burma.
Yeah.
That particular orangutan, and I've only heard this from one person. That particular orangutan does not do well in captivity and usually dies. So all these other ones, like the orangutan that Clint Eastwood used in his Every Which Way But Loose movies, Clyde, that was the standard one that they have in Malaysia that is able to tolerate captivity and be trained.
Right.
So and if you can see Clyde is not that big.
Mm-hmm.
Now, an interesting story. I was reading about a gentleman back in the 30s and 40s named Frank Buck. He used to go over to. He got real famous. They put out a book about him called "Bring Him Back Alive." He was the Indiana Jones of his time. But he had got a hold of an 8-foot orangutan that he got from this village. And yeah, an 8-foot one. And I learned when I read the book again, I picked up on that. I went, wait a minute, 8 foot. They average 6 foot. And I told Cliff Bereckman about it. I told Dr. Muldrum about it, and they said, "Wow, I never heard that story." He got a hold of it from the village, came down to the Singapore and sold it. He bought it, but the animal died on the way back to the States. And back then, when the animals died, they chuck them overboard because of this is the 30s and 40s before World War II. So, and he even makes it comments in the book that this is orangutan is like no other orangutan he's ever seen before. And the village caught it by getting the animal drunk. And this animal had killed some people in the village, and it was sitting in a tree, and they left water down in it, and then they started spiking the water to where it was, and the animal fell asleep, and they had built a cage and got it in a cage and got it over to the coast to sell it. So, but an 8-foot orangutan, that's really, and again, this is Frank Buck, he would get all the measurements and stuff because he would send them back to the States, for a zoo or somebody to buy it. And of course he had to have all his measurements correct when he sent them over there for a potential buyer.
And as we were talking about earlier, the kind of exotic pet trade, the zoo trade, it's so interesting how we're taking these animals out of their native areas and putting them in all these other areas. They're dying along the way. They're creating new ecosystems, affecting the ecosystems. They're, in the wild, they're being destroyed, like the gorillas and the chimps in Africa with the poaching and the civil wars going on there. It's very similar to the orangutan. So it's just so.
Elephants for their tusks. It's we're our own worst enemy.
We really are, and everything else.
When it comes to nature.
I think that's a shame, and I think that's why a lot of people like the idea of Bigfoot as this thing that's just it's always out of our reach. It's free of our sort of machinations, our ability to destroy everything, which I think is part of the kind of the appeal of the Bigfoot.
Whenever I do a presentation, I always get asked, would you kill a Bigfoot if you were out there? Would you kill one? And I always say, I understand science needs a specimen to verify what this animal is and all, but it's not going to be me that kills one.
Right.
All right. Now, if I'm walking in the woods or doing research and I do find a dead Bigfoot, I'm not going to leave it there.
Right.
I'm going to put that sucker in the back of my truck, and I'm going to find the first Wendy's restaurant, because Wendy's has got these huge freezers, and I'm going to throw it in the freezer, and I'm going to call Dr. Muldrum, Lauren Coleman, Lyle Blackburn. I said, get down here real quick and see this thing before the government takes it away from me.
Right. Make sure you cut off a piece for yourself in case the men in black come and rush and get it.
Because they will take it away from you.
Oh, you talk about that with folks that are pro-kill or anti-kill, what the implications of that were to be if these things are in the Homo genus, like a lot of people tend to think they are, if they're more on the ape side, or if there's something kind of in between, would there be legalities with that? I mean, I don't think so as much, but it would still be really kind of an interesting ethical and moral question. But Nianta, how's it going? He says, we're just glorified cavemen. Yeah, I mean, that I don't think that's an inaccurate, sort of portrayal. But got some other people rolling the chat. We got Brian and Chewy. What's going on, man? Other people as well. But I did want to take this question from Peggy. Peggy asks, Robert, which forest or nature area would you suggest for first-time Bigfooters?
Well, what I tell people too is to go on to sites like the BRFO. Great site to go look at. They got a very great database of sightings, because I mean, not every part of the wooded area has there's Bigfoot out there. I like to think there is, but that's not necessarily the truth. But I always tell people, wherever you live, go onto the websites and just do some research and find out if there had any sightings in your area, and find out just where. Like I said, we have the Green Swamp. We have Tiger Creek Preserve that's had sightings. Haven't been any for a while right now. But, and that's where I go, where these things have, where they've been reported to be.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of struggling with, was there's so many areas you want to focus on. You could spend years just in one area, let alone different spots. So between the Everglades, places like Ocala, Mayaca, Osceola, there's so many good spots. I mean, just for nature lovers in general. So definitely, but it's always interesting to hear input from somebody who's down there on the ground. Now, here's a question from Kevin, who asks, what is the guess on approximately how many skunk apes might be in Florida?
I was talking, me and Dr. when I did Ohio conference years ago, I got up one morning, there's Dr. Muldrum. I sat down with him and we discussed that. And he said it has to at least be 200 for this to be for this population to thrive down in Florida, at least 200. So 200 plus. And then, like I said, they're seen all over Florida. They're seen all the way down in the Everglades. They're seen in Central Florida, like Green Swamp and stuff, and they're seen in the Panhandle, and they're seen up toward the Georgia border and the Alabama border.
Yeah.
So,
well, people got to realize that our borders mean nothing to any of these animals. So, with Florida panthers too, what's to stop a Florida panther from getting into Georgia?
No,
there's nothing. I mean, aside from aside from maybe human encroachment, that's what I was talking about earlier. Just trying to find those corridors. I guess there's one that's from the Everglades, kind of up towards Okeechobee, and then that sort of eastern coast, and then it goes up to Ocala, and then from there, I mean, you can get to the northern part, and then you're pretty much free to go anywhere in North America, sticking to the woods.
Speaking of Okeechobee, when I was teaching up there, I had a police officer, resource officer, came in and told me, he says, okay, close the door. Okay, I'm going to tell you something. I don't want you telling anybody. I said, one night I was had my car parked and I was with this lady who wasn't my wife, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And anyway, we heard some noises, and I turned my light on, and this said the skunk ape was standing right in front of his squad car. And so he started hitting the horn, and the thing walked off. And needless to say, with the lady he had, the mood was gone. So they turned around and left. But he said it was right off one of the rivers that goes into Lake Okeechobee.
Right. Yeah. Just it's so interesting to think about. And just as we've been talking about all these different animals and things that exist in Florida, how much different of an environment I think it is than even some of the swamps in the rest of the southern U.S. I mean, in places like Louisiana or Georgia, that Everglades environment is totally unique, as well as places like the Green Swamp. They're pretty much tropical year round. I mean, you're talking about that summer, the bugs and the humidity. I mean, I could not be in Florida in July or any time around then.
Oddly enough, one of the Seminoles, one of the best mosquito repellent is gator fat.
Interesting.
And then the Native Americans would do that. They would put especially the ones living down in the Everglades. And we had one night we had a bad experience. We were at a campfire. A friend of mine brought some gator meat out, and he was cooking it. And all of a sudden, we just got this god awful smell that hit the camp. Turned out there was a piece of fat that he had left on the meat. And I tell you, that it was the most god awful smell I've ever had in my life. I can imagine. The only good thing is we didn't have any mosquitoes that night at all. Bad thing was all of us were having problems sleeping because that smell was in our nostrils and we just couldn't get rid of it. It was just this, oh my God, that is the worst smell I've ever had,
So I guess you're trading one horror for another.
Yes.
So Jonathan asks, what's the best evidence for the skunk ape to ever come out of Florida? Good question. Thanks, Jonathan.
Well, we have Stacy Brown's video that his dad took a number of years ago, which I thought was pretty darn good. I got a hold of this footprints a couple of years ago. It was taken in 1976, and the gentleman that got it got a hold of me, and he told me he was from, he grew up north, and he would come down every summer to visit his grandmother down in Brooksville, which is north of Tampa. And he befriended this Vietnam vet who had a trailer and on some property. And the gentleman was growing marijuana in his backyard, And he said something was coming back there and messing with his plants, but he couldn't call the police because he's growing marijuana. This is back in the 70s. So, but he caught a glimpse of it a couple of times. And then one time he actually found the footprints, and he went and made castings of it. And he showed this guy, kept him in an all wooden ammo box. He had a left foot and a right foot. Well, the gentleman died, but oddly enough, he made this guy the executor of his estate, his trailer and stuff. So he went down there, and sure enough, he found the ammo box with the castings in it. And he got a hold of me. And I met him at a gas station. He pulled him out and told me the whole story and showed him to me. And of course, the left foot had damage. It was busted up because, back then he just used plaster of Paris,
Yeah.
And
do you mind holding it up one more time?
Sure. Now, this is a copy of it because he wouldn't let me have the original. So I asked if I could make a copy of it. And I gave him the molds where and I think he was selling some on there on
And what are do you know the exact sort of measurements of it off the top of your head?
Was it 14 inches? Somebody asked me that the other night, and I had them,
yeah, it's definitely interesting. That's somebody saying that there's ridges on there. Do you see any ridges or anything like that?
No, not really. Because again, it was taken in a back area where it was all. But I did show it to Cliff Bereckman and Lauren Coleman, and they in turn got a hold of the gentleman that. Because I put them in touch with them, and I think they got copies of the print too. I know David Baraka over at Expedition Bigfoot got a copy of it.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And it just in that area, Brooksville, that's where Ramona Clark Hibner, that was her base of operations down there. So I like showing this one because there used to be, there were some investigators saying that this animal is only about 6 foot tall. And does that look like that could have been made by something 6 foot tall?
Yeah.
So not saying people haven't, they could have seen an adolescent, Squatch and stuff.
Yeah, that's something I've heard too, is that people say they're typically smaller than the ones maybe in the Pacific Northwest
If,
or in
if
other
you go
areas.
look at the newspaper articles, it averages 8 foot.
Yeah.
Looking at the ones that I got a hold of down in Miami and down in Naples and stuff, and looking at some, of course, a couple of them I got a hold of the witnesses, and they said, "Yeah, we lied." And I went, "Oh, great! That was a great sighting." Yeah, well, we lied.
Which,
You didn't want to get in
that'll
trouble.
happen.
Yeah. But I mean, they came clean and told me that they could have. Didn't have to tell me that. But there was a deputy that saw. They got a call before Naples was really built up in the 70s. They got a deputy got a call that there was something down by this pond near a golf. They were building a golf course, and he went down there, and the thing stood up. When he flashed the flashlight around, and and he said it was about 8 feet tall. So.
Yeah, that doesn't seem that much different from, I guess, other Sasquatch reports in North America. Yeah, as Jay here says, that's a giant footprint, come from something awfully big and heavy, pretty hot there in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, I've also heard of people saying that these things are a different type of Bigfoot or a subspecies, which,
It just seems, yeah. I mean, like I said, they are the hair seems to be lighter, and I would attribute that to the environment down there. They are more comfortable going into the water.
Yeah.
And say, I mean, when I had an incident, it was we heard it splash. Well, we had something screaming at us. It was splashing in the water, and then when my son had his night vision goggles, we saw some glowing eyes looking down at us. And this was right after that gentleman had seen it during Thanksgiving of 2012. And it was screaming at us. And even my son says, "I don't know what that is. I know what a bear sounds like and a panther, but this sounds really, He said it reminded him of the Sierra sounds. The only thing is we didn't get any whistles. It was just, and it felt like it was coming out of the woods toward us, from the swamp, because we were on a road that had swamp on both sides of us. And I went to go retrieve a trail camera, and I was going to grab it and come back to the car. My son came with me, and lo and behold, we have something in the woods keeping up. We would stop, it would stop. So it was pretty scary. I didn't have my bear mace with me or anything, because again, I was just going to grab the trail camera and come right back. I didn't think I was going to encounter anything.
Right. Yeah, it's just something interesting thinking about that. You see, I mean, if you took, let's say, you can use other animals as an example. Take a Sasquatch from Washington State and put it in Florida. I mean, I imagine there'd probably be some issues. It probably wouldn't. Maybe it could adapt to the environment like humans. You can take a human that's grown up in one place and move to another place and live in a different climate. I suppose that's possible. But something like even a mountain lion. Let's say you take one from the Rocky Mountains and put it in Florida. I wonder if it would it not be able to survive in that environment for long, or are these animals that adaptable? It's curious. I know they've taken mountain lions from parts of the Texas population and reintroduced them into Florida, and
that's true.
A bunch of them died, and then they just wanted to kind of have up the population, I guess.
Well, they get hit by cars. I mean, and if you go down there, especially on I-29, they have fences up to try to prevent these animals, and they have little canals that they can go through to get to the other side versus them. But Dave Shealy said they still jump the fence. And if you'll see also down in areas, you'll see a whole bunch of sand spread out on the side of the road, and you're like, what did they do that for? They did that because when the panthers walk by, then they'll say, "Oh, okay, we have panthers here. There's their tracks."
So that's actually really smart. Make a sand trap, yeah.
And of course, they've also, Dave told me they've got some skunk ape tracks the same way, by putting that sand out.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I think one of the biggest things that I'm interested in. Maybe aside from the skunk ape in Florida is the panther. I mean, you just have that. You got the gators, all the other fascinating animals that you don't have in other places, but the panthers themselves, I think it's an interesting parallel to Bigfoot. That they're so elusive. There's only a certain number. They are seen, obviously, as probably more frequently than the Bigfoots or the skunk ape kind of thing. But we do have a couple questions in the comment about one from Jay says, "I'm curious about your thoughts on Mark Zasky," and I'll couple that with Brian's question: "What's Robert's opinion on Zasky footage he gets coming out of Florida?"
Which one is that? because I see a lot of footage, and a lot of times I don't associate them with names. Which one
Yeah,
is?
I don't know a whole lot about him. I know it's he was a guy who was doing videos for a while out there, and the only stuff I ever saw were kind of blob squatchy.
Yeah, I'm not much for blob squatches. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
mean, because I'm a retired MP, and my
Yeah.
whole thing is, would I take this to court and say, hey, this is my evidence? You know, so I mean, you got Stacey Brown's video, which clearly, it's very clear, even though it's taken with a thermal, versus a blob squatch where, you know, and I've seen some where I go, yeah, it could
Right.
be. But if you just, what did they say on that old TV show, Ghost Hunters? When in doubt, throw it out. So
Right. Yeah, I think the problem with blob squatches personally is that if you talk to somebody about, this is what it was and this is what happened, and it's there, they could probably talk you into seeing it at some point because humans, we have our
mhm,
pareidolia. We want to see a human-like
yes,
shape, right? So
hmm
um, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some. I've heard of some stories that are pretty convincing, but they're like, well, this is all I have to show for it. But there's a lot of people out there who put blob squatches out regularly, and they just expect us
they
to
do.
really kind of accept
It's like the
that.
Ghost Hunters with the orbs. They
Yeah,
get
right.
orbs, and fortunately, dust particles can make. So, like I said, the video that the guy gave me, he said it was 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun it hadn't quite come up. There was mist on this field, but you can see something standing out there, but you can't quite see what it is.
Was that the Mayaka one, or which one was
No,
that?
no, that was one that I was telling you about that was taken in the Green Swamp by
Oh, right, right. Okay.
they came to me, and he even said, "I'll be honest, bro, I'll show it to you, but you can't really." He said, "But I could see it clearly." In fact, he said he was sitting on his tree stand, and he was playing on his phone, you know, and he caught movement off to his left. He looked over and saw this thing come walking out, and the first thing popped his head was a guy with a ghillie suit on.
Yeah.
But he was kind of taken back how fluid this thing was moving through the palmettos versus a human that would be kind of clumsy. And he said it got to the middle of the field, and then it was like sniffing. So he took his cell phone and he started filming it, and the thing was just sniffing the air. And he turned around and looked right up at him. And
Hmm.
then he said a chill went down his spine when he went, "Oh my God, that's real. That isn't a guy in a suit."
Wow.
And then he, was debating whether or not to put his hand back on his rifle. Was this thing going to come charging at him or what? But it didn't. It went in a different direction, took off running. He said the thing was incredibly fast. And it took us about 2 weeks. I mean, it really messed with him pretty bad. The gentleman's son was saying it. I mean, when he got home, he went right to his room and was laying in his bed. I mean, it just really messed with, I had a very traumatic experience seeing that thing. And but he took us out 2 weeks later, and we did find out. We went the direction where he said it went. We did find tracks, but we went into this road that was flooded, and all the tracks were filled with water. And I mean, I tried to take a couple castings, but unfortunately, they don't look like anything like a footprint.
Yeah. That's
But we took measurements. You could see the stride on this thing where it had went running. So, and and again, like I said, with this lady, the detail this guy was able to tell, and how he never deviated from his story. It got better and better as he told it. He stuck to just how how the incident happened.
yeah. Now, what did you make of the video? I mean, you said that you were actually able to see it, or that
Oh,
he
I have a
showed you the
copy.
video.
Like I said, I showed it. I'm allowed to show it to people. I just can't give
Oh,
anyone.
okay.
That was the
Yeah. Right.
agreement. I can't. You could, if I was to show it to you and not say anything about it, you might think it was a tree stump.
Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, if you're looking at it real closely, because again, he had an older phone,
Yeah.
and those older phones, when you film, things appear further out than what they are. But and I went out there, and there was no tree stumps anywhere in that area, and he kind of guided me where it was standing, and my wife got in the tree stand and took pictures, and you can see that whatever it was a lot taller than I was.
Okay. Gotcha.
Standing out there.
So,
So
I
we
mean,
did.
you guys did a follow up. You did all the proper sort of stuff that I would expect should be done with that kind of video. And I think Upper Canada Sasquatch brings up a good point. Says it's hard to get a good pick on a moment's notice in an extraordinary situation. Yeah, like you said with that Black Panther kind of thing you saw, you probably realized after the fact, take a photo. How many times do we hear that? And I think there's a difference between you have something like that where there's a backstory and you can kind of understand what's going on, as opposed to maybe somebody that's every single piece of footage they put out is a blob squash that you really, or the, I hate the red circles and the stuff like you see on Facebook and everywhere else where people are just, there's a Bigfoot here and there's one here. And it's at that point, I mean, you could just give it to a kid and say, how many Bigfoots do you see? And they'll point out, it's like, I think as Cliff says, if it's not good enough if you have to point it out, more like he's talking more about footprints, but I think it's applicable to video as well. And photos.
People tell us to not look at this. Now I'm going to turn it a little bit. Now back up a little bit. Now, do you see it?
Right.
No. Okay. Now those are the eyes. So you can just see the mouth. Okay. Can you come a little close? Now can you see it? And again, I said, if you're having that much difficulty getting me to see this photo, it's not. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's quite possible it may be something else.
Yeah, right. And I mean, also Jay, who was on our show last week, obviously gave his eyewitness testimonial. He brings up an interesting point, from an eyewitness experience where he says, I never thought of taking a picture. It's the last thing on your mind, especially if it's traumatic or frightening, like what happened to him. You're probably worried more about your life than trying to get an accurate photo.
Well, I tell people now, get a GoPro and turn it on and keep it on.
Yeah.
Just keep the thing on, because you never know what's going to happen out there. As you said, something might pop up. You're like, oh gosh, where's my camera? If you got the GoPro on your chest or on the headpiece. So that's what I'm doing now. I keep it going. In fact, I went on the way out. When we go down into the park area, I'll put it on the dashboard.
Yeah, in case you get a road crossing.
Now, the only bad thing is my GoPro doesn't have night vision.
Their GoPros are terrible at night, which really kind of stinks. I know they're getting a little better, but there's going to have to be some solution, small night vision cameras that don't use IR maybe. And to reiterate that, Brian, who I've also had on the show, has had an experience up here in New Hampshire, but he says when something strange or terrifying happens to you in the middle of nowhere, your first thoughts are not, let me get a picture or let me record. It's pure confusion and fear. That's so often what we hear.
Yeah, I had a similar incident. I had a ranger tell me this over at Tiger Creek Preserve, because we told him we were out looking for Bigfoot. And the first thing he goes, well, if they're out there, this is where they would be. And I went, wow, that's the first ranger that ever said that to us. And he goes, yeah, I had a couple years ago saw it. They were coming down the trail going up the hill, and they said the thing was standing there looking at them, and they turned around and ran right back. So I mean, they didn't want to take a picture, and I've had a lot of people, hunters, tell me to walk up on it and just freeze looking at this thing, looking at them, and it's the whole thing about getting a good picture. It's hard to get a good picture because of the moment.
Right.
You're excited, you're scared, you don't know what this animal is going to do. Is it going to come at you? Is it going to leave? You want to get up and get a good photo, but what if it turns around and starts chasing you? And
right.
So I mean, and then I get people say, well, what about trail cameras? And they go, well, they got IR. And I had a biologist tell me that most creatures, a lot of creatures, cats have it, but if you have an animal that it pretty much lived its whole life in the woods, it's going to pick up the IR, because it's nothing. It's out of the norm for what they normally see in their environment. So it would probably pick up on the IR.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there's evidence. There's evidence that shows that now, especially with tigers. This is something I've talked to Matt Pruitt about when I had him on the show. He was talking about how the researchers that were trying to get tigers in Siberia would find their trail cameras just ripped apart, and the tigers would come from behind because they could sense. They knew the IR there. I have pictures of deer in the daytime even looking right at the camera. As soon as it goes off, they're kind of blinking and looking right at it. Why weren't they doing that or immediately from a different angle? Is right when they're looking directly at it. So trail cameras don't seem to have worked in North America when it comes to Sasquatch.
Yeah, I've now put mine up higher. I've got them real high up now, thinking, because most of the time we go in the woods, we look eye level.
Right, it's down there on the ground.
So I've been coming up. We've been taking tree stands with us and everything, and we're trying to get ourselves up high, looking down. And I've been putting my trail cameras up, mostly too, so they won't get stolen.
You don't want to deal with people. Yeah, that's always something I was worried about, even though I put mine in a pretty remote area. There are some hunters that go in there occasionally, but I'm like, how am I going to, when I'm walking in to do the retrieval, of course, it's like after a month, it's like, is it still going to be there? Did it get ripped down? Did someone take it? If it's not locked in or whatever, but it's something you got to worry about. That is a good idea, but trail cameras don't seem to have worked in North America when it comes to Bigfoot.
Yeah, they give off something, the IR, maybe it's the sound of the battery, but and if you got something with super, hearing, which these animals very in tune with its environment, it's going to have very acute hearing. Maybe it does hear it, or if it hears it, because those things have the mechanism that they trip the light and it activates them. And then again, you also have the human smell of these things on there too, even though you could try to spray them down with, no scent and stuff.
Right. Well, I think we'll take just another question or two. And on that note, kind of similar to what we're talking about, Upper Canada Sasquatch asks, thoughts on Sasquatch EMF sensitivity?
What do you mean EMF?
Like electromagnetic frequencies?
I don't know if we know about them. I was on a show the other night. We're talking about, sounds that the human ear doesn't pick up.
Right.
And sometimes people feel like this thing can freeze them in place, whereas I do know when I was going to school years ago, we had in a church, Catholic church, they had an organ, and there was one of the pipes that nobody was allowed to hit the button on. And this organ was super old. Can't remember how old, but it was really old. But they said when you hit this button, after a while, you would get a sense of sheer terror that they would do. And I was thinking, I wonder if these animals, have the ability with sound to actually get you into that mode where you're just frozen. Because I've had a number of hunters tell me that they see it and they just freeze.
Yeah.
And then it walks off and they just, So
getting into the whole infrasound conversation, which is definitely interesting.
There's not saying that can't be there. There was a gentleman that was on there who's been doing recordings and stuff, and oh my God, they put out some really great information about that stuff too. Stuff I didn't know, but I'm definitely going to look into it more and definitely be more cognizant of it when I'm out there in the woods now, and especially recording, which, that's one thing I haven't really been doing. I've been trying to taking pictures, but I haven't been recording. So put stuff out there and just record, see, get some, maybe I'll get something good like the Sierra sounds,
Speaking of sound, Jay says, I hear a cat from Christmas past. I think that maybe one of your cats was going off a minute ago.
I do have my cat in here. I closed the door. Yeah, she's sitting right over there.
That's funny. I heard it too. I thought that was cool. But
yeah, she's an old cat, and I don't know why she came in here either.
She wants your attention. She's like, enough talking. Time to hang out.
Yeah.
That's funny. But last question here, and this kind of ties back to what we're talking about with blob squatches. This is not a blob squatch, but Kevin asks, about if Robert has any thoughts on that video of the Bigfoot ripping apart the tree stump in the swamp. That was Florida.
That was taken in Mississippi.
Was it Mississippi? Okay.
Of course, it's morphed. I think it originally was in Mississippi, and then people all of a sudden it was Louisiana, then it was Florida, then it was Georgia. But if I remember correctly, when it first came out, it happened in Mississippi. It's a pretty, video. The individual obviously was, I don't know if he was a Bigfoot hunter or not, but tried to get up close. And then I guess when he thought that the animal saw him, turn around and ran. So, it's an interesting video. I thought it was, let me let her out.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's interesting with that video.
I do like that video. There was one we had not a while back called the Lettuce Lake video where it was taken down. And I'll be honest, I thought it was something to that. I really said, wow, that's a pretty good video. And I got a hold of the guy through email, and I emailed him and I said, sir, you got a really good video, and I would really like to hook up with you, and maybe we can go and show me. And he wrote back and told me to F off. And that's all he said. And I went, wow, okay.
Whoa.
So I said, okay. I've never met anybody who just told me that. When, usually when I contacted people, they're more than happy to come show me. Stacy, is taking me out to the area where his dad took that video numerous times. Dave Shealy took me out where he took his film. Again, that guy took me, had to use the film. The gentleman who took it out of Maeka,
Yeah.
he showed me where he was at when he took the film.
Right. I mean, even if there's doubt about the footage, if you're transparent about it, at least, and letting people come in and independently evaluate the site, I think that speaks in your favor, so to speak, in terms of
Well, that would
credibility.
seem to be the person's definitely trying to say, validate what, like you said,
right.
I took a film that I think is real, and I want more people to come see it to help me prove that I'm,
sure.
I'm not crazy, that I didn't, see something,
Well, yeah, Upper Sasquatch Canada says he was probably hounded beyond belief. That happens too. I know people with other cryptozoological mysteries that have sort of closed themselves off, but at the same time, I mean, it's either the log ripper one that we were talking about that's probably from Mississippi, or that Lettuce Lake one. I feel like I've heard that those two were hoaxes, but you hear that with almost every video out there. So it's tough to keep a track almost of which ones have been outed and which ones haven't, which ones people are just saying are hoaxes versus.
If I was being hounded, I mean, I was really nice on the email.
Right.
I told him, I said, I think you got something there, dude. I think that's a great video. And I think, I really like to, come out there. I mean, I was really kissing his butt to try to, to get it, and then when he turned out, and I was like, wow.
Sorry, I was laughing because Jay's comment, he said, I only tell people to F off when they say they don't like cheese. I'm there with you. Unless they're lactose intolerant, then I have sympathy. But
yes,
that's sorry to derail it. There's always you can't take it too seriously. That's the way I look at it. You got to have some fun, and appreciate everyone in the chat always throwing the jokes. And
yeah, like I always tell everybody, you can't take yourself too serious.
Yeah.
I think the Josh Gay said it the best. He says, I don't take myself serious, but I take what I do serious.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to have fun and jokes along the way, and that's just part of it. But yeah, well, it's been super interesting to have you on, Robert. Really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on. I had a great time. Got some great questions in there. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Now, for people that want to find out more about where they can keep in track or keep in touch with you, or where to get your books, where would be the best place to find you?
Okay. As far as getting, I'm doing the whole Facebook thing. I have Robert Robinson, International Legend Tripper. I go through the internet every morning, and I repost articles that I think are really good, sightings and all that. I do have a webpage, but I haven't. A friend of mine is going to help me get it up and running. Just named Randy. As far as my book goes, both my books, they are available on Amazon. They're Legend Tripping, The Ultimate Adventure, and in fact, Lauren Coleman did the forward for that one. And my new one, International Legend Tripping, which I had David Hatcher Childress, who's also my publisher, and thank God, he's the one who helped me put these books together and get them out there. He's the kind of the secret behind my books. But they are published by Adventures Unlimited Press. And David also has the Ivan T. Sanderson books, and he publishes some of Nick Redfern's books over there at his site too. He's on that TV show Ancient Aliens. He's one of the hosts on that show. Real nice guy. I mean, like I said, it was funny when we wrote my second book, because he called me up and told me my first book was doing good. What are you gonna do for a second one? He said, well, I haven't thought about it. He goes, what do you think about it? And call me back in a few minutes. So anyway, they're available there, and of course, I am going to be at the upcoming Florida Bigfoot conference. I will have books this time. Last time I didn't get my books because they got held up because of a hurricane.
Oh no!
And they got held up in South Carolina, so they showed up 2 days later after the conference. But I will have books available for this conference here.
Awesome. Very, very awesome. Now, thanks everyone in the chat. As always, great folks. Thank you, Jay. Lots of great people in the chat as well. Let's see. Peggy, Merry Christmas, Happy and Safe New Year. Thank you so much for that super chat. Upper Canada Sasquatch. Thank you. Thanks again, Peggy, for that. Nianta says, good night, everyone. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandra. Kevin as well. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to everyone that's celebrating. And Mothman said, I got Legend Tripping in person at the Mothman Festival. So that's where he got it.
Yeah, I did.
which is awesome. And Merry Christmas to you as well, Brian. Thank you so much, Mikey Z-Man, and Brent as well. Thank you. Happy holidays, Brent. Thanks everyone in the chat. As always, you guys are awesome. Love the conversations, love the questions you guys ask for not only myself, but obviously our guests and everything. And like I said, next week's show, not really sure if who we're going to have on yet. We're still kind of figuring that out. Possibly Stacy Brown. We gotta figure it out. So, but there will be something going on either way. Last show of the year, I believe, until the year, unless I'm totally off with my dates. But either way, Robert, thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to working with you as well down there in Florida, because I can't wait to get down there myself. Alrighty, guys. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, guys, and we will see you guys next week. Either way, bye bye.